Welcome to the Irrelevant Podcast. I'm Nathan Jones with my co-host Alex Lewis, back here on a Saturday, episode 53 with Steven Thompson. Steven, go ahead and we're going to jump right into it, man. You just tell the people who the heck you are, what you do, and why they should know the name Steven Thompson.
Well, I don't live too far from you. I live in Adrian, Missouri, so I'm about an hour south of Kansas City. Uh, Strength and conditioning was never my goal. It was never something I wanted to coach or really do. I was just living life. And then as I got older, my kids got grown, started putting on some weight, started, just sitting around the house. And I'm like, this can't be the rest of my life. I got to do something. So I got out, started working out on my own, started in the living room, a P90X kind of routine. Don't know where to start, don't know what to do. This looks like it'll work. Well, I'll tell you what, that sucks. P90X is freaking god awful. I'm like,
Terrible.
there has to be a better way to be in shape. That led to one thing, and then it led to another, and then it led to Windler 531, and then it led to powerlifting. And I decided that, if you're going to stay in the gym, you need a reason to stay in the gym, not just so you look in the mirror and say, yeah, I look good. That's not going to last forever in my mind. So I started doing some powerlifting competitions. I'm not great at it. The first ones were god awful, but I guess you got to take that step. So I started doing that, and then that turned into a few kids during COVID asking if they could work out with me because the gyms all shut down. So I built a little place out in the arena of my barn, which that was never going to work. Trying to ride colts and trying to move all the weights all the time, that wasn't going to work. So we built a platform to the side. That worked for a while. That worked all summer. Now it was hotter than hell that summer, but it was a nice platform. And then, but in the back of your mind, you're like, this is only going to work for 2 more months. This is only going to work so long. So picked up a bunch of overtime at work, built an addition onto the barn, like a garage part, put a little gym in the back, and lo and behold, kids started showing up, man. It was 1 to 2 to begin with, and then 3 and 4. And then now we're looking at adding on and trying to get some more athletes in.
So how did you go? How did you get your word out? Was it just kids that were just looking for something more, or just the kind of the high schools around where you're at don't really do a whole lot of weights? How big of a school is Adrian? I don't know. Are they class 3, class 4?
No, they were class 2 in football
Class
last
2.
year, and
Okay.
they were the smallest. So at the end, it was us versus Lamar, and
Yeah.
so Lamar's on the big end.
Oh, yeah.
And we're on the small end. Now to get the word out, it helps when your first kid's a state championship wrestler. You know what I mean? When you come in and but then again, it helps and it hurts because everybody looks at him and they're like, well, he's a freak.
Right.
Everybody's a freak. Well, lo and behold, he brought in a 113-pound sophomore, and that kid graduated wrestling. What'd he go up to? I want to say his senior year, he wrestled 155 and he took 3rd in state. Now that changes the course of how things go.
Right. Absolutely.
And then Adrian Boys lost the state finals game 2 years ago. And those juniors were hungry for another chance. And so I'll tell you what, it was a week after football, and they know me. My daughters went to school there, So a week after football, I walk in the gym and it's full. I mean, these kids are like, this ain't going to happen again. Well, we ran into Lamar, and that's a little bit of a buzzsaw, but so word of mouth, I guess, to really make a long answer of a short question.
Were they showing up to your gym, or were they just showing up to the gym at the school?
No, they were showing up at my house.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. How many kids did you have rolling through there?
Right now, I just had a couple more show up the other night, so I'm somewhere between 14 and 16. So that's not a huge number. I realize that, but the gym's free. I don't charge anything for kids to come. I needed workout partners in the beginning, and they were down to do it. So, since we started, I think I did the count the other day. We've had 9 kids offered at the next level. We've had 10 all states. I don't know how many district guys, and I believe it's 3 conference players of the year.
That seems like you're going in the right direction then, for sure. Especially, so how do you convince people in a small town then? Because I'm kind of in the same situation. Cassville's not huge, but it's not big. It's not by any means, but it's hard to get kids to kind of come to these gyms outside of what they're already doing at schools. So how do you kind of do you have to contend with the school? Is the school kind of an issue or anything like that, or do they kind of just they don't have anything else, so that they're just using you as a really good resource because you're luckily in that area for them?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and that's something I've thought about a lot too. The one thing I think of is, like you said, Cassville's small. Did you grow up in Cassville?
I did not actually. I grew up even smaller, Mansfield. If you know where Mansfield's at,
Yeah, yeah,
so
the home of Laura Ingalls, right?
yeah, sure is. So that's actually where I grew up. But yeah, so much smaller than that. We didn't have any weights. So
Okay, well, where I was going with that is I grew up in Adrian,
okay,
and so the good and the bad of that is the good is I know everybody. The bad is they know me and they know me my whole life. So how possibly can you build this garage gym and train these athletes in this way when that's not how we know you? We know you as, an electrician or a welder or a cowboy. Uh, in a small town, you can't change your interests because nobody will change with you. They will always know you for the 18-year-old kid or, whatever you were. So that's been a huge part of contention with some aspects of it because they're like, well, how could he know anything about it? Well, you can learn, you can evolve. But so the school, I would say, I don't want to get in trouble with the school because they do work with me on their athletes. But I don't know, like looking at your guys' stuff, I run a conjugate. I think you guys run somewhat of a conjugate. You talk to a lot of conjugate guys. You understand that concept of it. You understand what you're wanting to do, bringing up weak points. That's a hard conversation to have to somebody that doesn't understand that. The old, just run a 5 by 5 and then stack as many exercises in there as you can. And then really, we don't care about the weights. We really are just have you here to run. We have you here to condition. It's almost like a little bit of a trick is what it looks like to me, but that is what it is. But so the school has been good sending their athletes out. Some neighboring schools send their athletes down. uh, at the end of the day, I look at it as almost like a library of athletes. So when my guys walk into the school, they don't have to ask them where they go. They know where they go. They see the development, they see the size, they see how they play on the field, and then that seems to bring more. The one thing I've noticed is when I was a freshman, I don't remember the sophomore or the seniors and juniors being invested in the younger classmen. This group I have now is they're not like that. They will go and get freshmen, they will bring them out, they will go talk to the freshmen. They'll talk to eighth graders getting ready to become freshmen. So as far as my advertising, it's the parents of the kids that come here and it's the kids that come here. I've never had any luck going and talking to a kid and be like, "Hey, why don't you come to my gym?" I If they're not down, they're not coming.
right.
So it seems to me that the kids you put out in the world are what's going to bring you more kids.
Yeah, results speak. I was talking to my wife about this morning. Like I've been posting a lot more stories about what my kids are doing in here lately, and it just my views have gone up on Instagram, and it's getting in front of more eyes and things like that, and more people are liking and sharing, and so just getting kids' interest, it seems like sparked in the right direction, allows for you to have that conversation to get them to the gym in the first place. So
You're definitely right, and I try to post a lot of my kids. But then you also hit on a point there earlier on. Parents and some kids believe they're doing enough at high school. In saying that, some high schools probably are doing enough. I know Lamar, they have an incredible weight room. That might be enough. But in some of these other schools, you're not even touching the surface. When you go and you talk to your kid, I don't know, who all is listening as far as what their demographic is, but when you go talk to your kid, if he doesn't know his vertical and he doesn't know his 40 time or a flying 10 time, if he doesn't know his squat, if he doesn't know his bench press, if he don't know those numbers, he probably needs some work somewhere else. Those are the metrics that drive athletes. And so if they don't know them, then you have to start questioning where are they getting the carryover? Because
yeah,
it's not important with who they're working with. So then now it's not important to the athlete. So how much growth did you leave on the table because the people you're working with don't really quite understand it?
What kind of things do you like to do with the kids as far as to get those metrics to a place where they're able to perform better on the field?
Okay, so what we run a conjugate like you, and then we tweak in and out. Some of the things I've seen that I think are going to have the most carryover is we do a winning warm up. I'm sure you guys know Matt Winning. We'll pick two exercises, and as I look out at the athletes, I'll try to pick out the weak spots or a place that they want to look better in. So chest, let's say if we're gonna bench press that day, we're gonna do some sort of dumbbell, 4 by 25 reps, 4 sets of 25 reps, and then we're gonna pick a back movement, a face pull, something like that, 4 by 25 reps. That hypertrophy really puts size on them. It puts conditioning on them, and then it builds them up where they want to be built up at. That would be the start. When we put that in, we've seen a huge change in overall conditioning and size. Now that's not necessarily athletics, but that's the start. Where I've seen it carry over in athletics is like on lower days. Well, now you have a place to put in your reverse hyper and then match that with a foot strengthening skill. Because what I've been noticing is a lot of athletes coming in that midfoot and ankle is really weak. Well, then now when you watch them run, they can't get to an isometric back leg because their foot will cave. They'll come to their heel, and then that knee will fall in. So where do you start? I mean, you got to start, I guess, from the ground up. So we'll start strengthening that foot. I'm seeing bigger carryover there. The reverse hyper, that seems to, in a glute ham raise, that seems to get our hamstring injuries have went way down. Our healthiness is went way up, especially in the hips. Now we'll do a wider box squat. I'm not necessarily saying we're going to west side wide, but you know, like I know you guys talked to Nate Harvey. He'll tell you that wide squat will carry over to a narrow way before a narrow will carry over to a wide. So I try to keep my guys wide, and I think the sumo pull has had the biggest carryover to the field of any exercise, I believe. And then we rotate in speed days. So we rotate in. Okay, so I know I'm jumping around, but upper body days are our vertical jumps, lower body days are our broad jumps. And then that will go directly with what we're doing with speed. So lower body days we'll do acceleration, upper body days we do speed. And then our acceleration depends on what we did in the gym, kind of a Charlie Francis style mentality. So if I know I crushed him in the gym with maybe a max squat and then a 5 by 5 on pulls, we're going to really extend that acceleration. So we might go 20-yard build up into a 5-yard fly, because that long acceleration should be submaximal, you know. Now, if we have a lighter day, speed day, dynamic effort day, we'll crunch that up and we might do a 10-10, a 10 build up into a 10-yard fly. And then I think just getting them out and running, work on the acceleration phase, making that be a component, having the split days, that's where I've seen the biggest carryover. Because I think on the football field, if you go back and you watch some of my guys, they were exploding in the acceleration part, but then when they got in the open field, they were running away from guys. So I think the way all that stacked has created the most carryover on the field.
What are some of the upper body variations that you like to use for pressing and stuff like that to build that upper body strength?
Okay, so I hadn't done much of it. And I talked to Jared Bidney the other day. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Jared, Explosive Mechanics. I mean, just an unbelievable guy. We personally, before I talked to him, we would do we would kind of build up and build down. So we might go from a floor press to the next cycle. We might go to a low incline. Well, then we might come back to a cambered bar bench press and then go to a steep incline. That way you're just keep hitting that whole range of motion among your cycles. But the one we just added, and I talked to Jared and he loves it, is a chained floor press. And I threw that in last cycle, and I had some kids that were, I don't know, they were running probably 205, 210 on their bench, and they hit that when they finished the cycle. And they did a little math on those chains. They went and, you're not with them all the time. They went to school to see what they could do, and all of their bench presses were up. They were Jared's got it figured out. He's got it down to a science. He understands. So if he's telling me to do it, I'm definitely going to do it. And the carryover there was huge. But we'll do a two board press. Anything past that, I'm not. We're not geared. We're raw lifters. I don't know what the carryover would be on a raw lifter at a 4 board press. If we're going to do that, I like pins. I like pressing off the pins, build that starting strength on them. So we'll rotate that in there quite a bit. Speed days, we run waves. So we'll do a 45% for 3 weeks, but we'll do it naked, we'll do it with chains, and we'll do it with bands. The next 3 weeks will be 50, same system. The next 3 week will be 55, and then we'll come back to 45. That seems to help. There's the variation that you can create, especially in bench press. The kids love it. I think that pin press probably has a ton of carryover on their starting strength. And then you can also set that where their mini max is. So if you've got a kid that's, let's say he's weak 2 boards off the chest, instead of pressing to a 2 board, you could set his pins at that height and then let him build starting strength there. That seems to be one we manipulate a lot.
How are you rotating your days? So are you like Monday, Tuesday, max effort, recovery, and then dynamic, or do you rotate yours differently, or how does your structure work throughout the week?
Okay, so Monday will be a heavy lower, and we will rotate. It's almost like a reverse 5-3-1. If that makes any sense. So that first week of the cycle, we're going to find 95% of our squat, whatever squat variation that is. And then after that, our accessory is going to drop down to the deadlift. And whatever variation that is, whether that be, a block pull or whatever the case may be, we'll run that for a 5x5. And then the next week, we'll flip flop those. So we'll pull the pull at 95%. And then we'll do the squat for 5x5. And then we'll finish that week up, or we'll finish that cycle up at a 3x3. That way they're kind of getting an accessory with that and then keeping everything growing the same. So Mondays are heavy lower, Wednesdays are heavy upper, and we will do a bench press variation, and then we will do some sort of heavy tricep movement as an accessory, whether that be weighted dips, banded dips, heavy tricep press downs, something like that. And then Friday will be our speed lower. So I just kind of explained to you what we do there. We do speed pulls, speed squats, and then Sundays are speed upper. So Sunday will be, we usually start with the speed press, and then we'll move into some sort of shoulder exercise. And then it'll be the opposite of what the bench press was. So if our bench press was a 95% Wednesday, our whatever overhead variation we have will be a 5x5. And then the next week they'll flip. That way you're only hitting 195% a body part a week. I think that leads to more recovery, and then it leans a little closer to the maximal effort method while you're still getting that brief maximal tension in your accessory lifts that are going to be somewhat heavy.
So do you said Jim Windler, you mentioned 5-3-1. Do you use a lot of what he teaches and a lot of his principles still in what you're doing, or did you take what he has and kind of mix it to make your own? Or what did you I know the accessory work that you're talking about seems like you kind of made 5-3-1 your own, it sounds like. So what did you see that kind of made you change 5-3-1 a little bit? Or what did you see that wasn't working about 5-3-1 that made you kind of change a little bit in that capacity?
I love Jim Windler to death, and nobody knows this stuff better than him. And I'd probably be fine just to stick with his method. But I like the dynamic days. So then that pushes you more to a West Side system. Now, obviously, our conjugate system, however you want to call it, because we're not at West Side, it's truly not a West Side system. You'll have guys tell you that. But how could I make 5-3-1 work with West Side? And that's what I came up with, is I could merge the two, and then I found I could keep it maximal effort days easier doing it this way than I could just doing the 5-3-1. And then I talk to guys that manipulate the 5-3-1 around, and then they get a cube. So then they get, then they get Brandon Lilly's method. So I think that 5-3-1 is so dang flexible that it morphs into so many things. I did the straight 5-3-1 like Windler had, and I took the dynamic days out. I thought we got really strong, but I don't think they looked as explosive on the field. Now, I'm sure whatever he's doing, he's coaching his own stuff. His guys, I'm sure, are very explosive. But I struggled getting that. So putting them dynamic days back in, they felt better about the gym. Not every, they liked the speed stuff. They were seeing it on the field. They were seeing benefits of it. So then I just started tweaking and figuring out what would work.
How long are your cycles or your waves that you're taking these through when you're talking about flipping back and forth? Are they like 3 or 4 week waves? So you're doing each one the same amount of times, or how does that work out for you?
We run 3 week waves. So that way we encompass the 5 and the 3 and the 1 manipulated. And then the next week they'll start the new cycle. Now they're high school kids. So I could program a deload in there the 4th week, but they got so much stuff going on in their lives. They're getting a deload. I was putting that deload in there and for a long time, and it just didn't seem like it was really having the benefit because they're going to miss for plays. They're going to miss for sporting events. They're going to miss for, summer, whatever they're doing. So with all the vacations and snow days and events they're in, it seemed like they were getting enough of a deload that I really didn't need to have that in there. Now, at the end of the summer, before football starts, I'll deload them right before I send them back. We'll hit like a circa max. I'll deload them because I know they're going to get hammered when they go to football practice. And that seems to work well. But Christmas, they're going to be doing their stuff. Thanksgiving, they're doing their stuff. The deload wasn't necessarily working for me. Now, if I see they're tired, we'll definitely back them off. But I've yet to see their numbers not go up.
You run into like overuse injuries at all with this type of system, or how do you manage stuff like that? Because I know like I help a bunch of college kids with powerlifting, and that's constantly seems to be the issue is that they're running into overuse stuff. And a lot of it is they're just left to their own devices and they don't trust me yet. So I don't get to actually program for most of them. But do you run into that with the high school kids? Like, do they go off on their own and go off program very often, or are they pretty strict with sticking with what you program for them?
These guys that come here are dialed in. Now they'll have a weights class in school and they've all come and talked to me and they're like, okay, what can we do in weights class that doesn't affect what we're doing here? And usually I'll tell them, do fun stuff, do stuff that would be accessory oriented, stuff that you don't normally, maybe we don't do here that you want to do it in there. And then we'll take care of what we do here. And then we'll see how it works out. Now that seems to work out good. I do see some overuse injuries, but I don't think they're coming from here. I think they're coming from what they're doing in their sports. I think they do an incredible amount of running. So when I first was getting them, I saw a lot of hips, a lot of sore hips. And as we've put in the sumo deadlift and the wide stance box squat, I think we've seen those hip injuries kind of go down and they seem like they're better. They all have tight hip flexors. We'll do a little bit of RPR and try to get those to fire, try to help them there. But how do you overcome a kid sitting 8 hours of the day? That's if they can't get up and move around and do all that stuff, I would expect you're going to see that. Now the problem gets to be if you let that hip flexor lock up, or if you're not listening to your athletes when they come in, they're like, hey man, my flexors are really sore. Well, it's not the end of the world. We don't program in a deload. Let's back it off tonight. So the overuse injuries I think I see are from the sports they're playing and not necessarily the system we're doing. But you make a good point, and I think you have to watch that. I think with the conjugate, you can vary stuff so much that you can move stuff around, and it's not the same thing every night.
You mentioned that you do vertical jumps and you do, your horizontal variations. How often do you switch the variation that you're doing horizontally and vertically, or are you just doing, Bidney talks about dumbbell jumps obviously a lot, but do you do box jumps with weights? How do you manipulate the horizontal aspect too? I mean, do you do a lot of single leg variations with your horizontal work, or how do you kind of talk about how you change your jumps up?
Okay, so we'll pick a jump that we kind of like. I'll kind of look at and see across the board maybe where I think we need some work, and then we'll do a light method, and then we'll do a heavy method that will interchange with what we're doing in the weight room. So like Bidney says, I believe, and I don't want to take him out of context, that they really don't do dynamic work anymore. They do jumps, and that is their dynamic work. And then he keeps all 3 methods in every one of his workouts. So taking that into consideration, that's kind of what I've landed on over the years. So if we're going to do heavy legs, we're going to do a light variation of a broad jump. Now I don't want to wear the broad jump out, so we'll do. Last night was a triple jump, single leg triple jump, and I knew we were going to work on some acceleration stuff. That's fairly low impact. Get them ready to accelerate. Well, our other night we might do that with dumbbells, or we might have a kid hold a band. Now you're not going to get 3 jumps with a band. You're not going to stretch a band that far, but you might get 2. And we'll variate that. Now we do depth drops, and we'll do depth drops unweighted on our heavy days, and then we'll do them with dumbbells on our light days. Broad jumps the same way. We'll do them unweighted, weighted, and then I'll do them against a band, maybe on their light day, and on their heavy day, I'll do them going with a band, so the band pulls them. So you got to back them up against that band. So we do, I would say probably every third week we jump into a single leg variation. And maybe I should be spending more time there, but they're athletes. They're doing a lot of single leg stuff in their sport. The double leg stuff, they seem to like better, seems to carry over well. I might be missing the boat on that a little bit, but that's kind of where I've landed. I don't know how you, I don't know you, what do you guys do down there?
I don't get into a lot of the single leg stuff. They're so force inefficient. Like they're so bad at putting force into the ground with 2 feet. They're also really bad when it comes to like reactive strength. Like with their, if they're doing like a hurdle jump or something like that, they're really bad about getting off the floor and things like that with just 2 feet to start. So once they start getting maybe proficient at that, and like they start to get some height with their jump, and they, their squat comes up, their deadlift comes up, they get a little bit more, a little more strength. They'll start to see their jumps obviously really improve, and they're actually becoming more coordinated too, to where they can jump better. And so once I feel like they're maybe in an environment where they can just do it with 2 feet in the first place, right? Then maybe later on we'll start getting into some of that single leg stuff. But I don't use them a ton yet, just because I don't have a ton of proficient jumpers yet. But they don't find their way into mine a whole lot. So again, that might be something that I need to do more, like what you're saying. But they're so uncoordinated and they're so force inefficient right now that getting them to just jump is a difficult task in itself.
Now you bring up something pretty interesting there that I think I've noticed. Now I could be totally wrong with this, and I don't know, but I'll look for the jumps where they are the most inefficient at absorbing the force, as opposed to producing the force. So a broad jump, I want it to be a big broad jump, but that's force production. We can work on that in, a sumo pull, something like that mimics that. But hitting those jumps where they struggle to make a good catch, that's where I want to be. That's where I think I see the most carry over to the field and I don't know, I hear it talked about some, but I don't know that I hear it talked about a ton. You got to dig into some books to find people really talking about that. I think Joel Smith hits on it good in some of his books, and then Baggett down in Hollister, when he wrote his books, I think he hits on it well. But when you start watching them kids jump, if you're not careful, they'll avoid those forces. Well, then now you say, well, why aren't they getting faster? Well, they're not getting faster because they've actively learned to avoid the forces that they're coming into. Where if you could find those jumps and you can start working on them, and you can get the kid to understand that, hey, your butt needs to stop when you make contact with the ground, not let it coast in, 4, 5, 6 inches before you make the stop. I think you see better athletes. And then I think you see better reversals, because it's not this real slow dragging eccentric.
Right.
You want healthy athletes. Healthy athletes have to stop on the field. Well, if you're letting them do all these jumps and they're coasting into the stop and avoiding all this, how are they doing it on the field?
Yeah, there's times where they need to maximally produce concentric force, right? And then there's other times where I'm trying to tell them, hey, quick, get off the ground, get off the ground, get off the ground. Like as soon as you hit, you got to go right back up. You got to go right back up. So we don't want to see ground contact time be too short or too long when we're doing things that require them to be able to reverse it as quick as they possibly can. So things like you're talking about, like depth drops especially, I love to use the hurdles. I think the hurdles are really good at teaching that skill. But yeah, like everything you said there is absolutely true. Because if they spend too much time on the ground, they're not actually getting faster.
And if they're spending too much time on the ground, Brandon Bird, he says it best. You might as well squat them. If that amortization phase is that slow, take them to a squat rack and save the chance of the injury. You need that quick amortization phase that you can't mimic in the squat rack. You know, um, going into the force absorption, where I see it the most, as you brought it up, is depth jumps. Once they reach a point, once they reach a height that they can no longer stop their butt when they make the ground, and their butt drops, well, that's their max. So now you have to maybe drop the height and go to weights or something like, or bands, something to teach that at a weight or at a height that's not maximal. I also see it in a box jump. You might have a kid that can jump 53 to 55-inch box, but they can't catch themselves at the top. Now, you did create hip mobility, you did create force production, you did create, an absolute mindset. I'm not saying not to do that, but being aware that, hey, we've reached a point that he can no longer absorb the forces at that height. Well, then now his submaximal work needs to be lower so that he can accommodate to absorbing those forces.
Do you like to load everything that you jump with, and how is it that you like? Do you mess with just always dumbbells, or do you have like a vest ever that you have them use, or different things like that? Are you loading them in different ways, or even like holding on to like a medicine ball, for example?
We will load all sorts of different ways. So we'll load dumbbells, and this was a hard lesson learned. We probably went a little bit heavy on some of our higher depth drops the other day, and everybody was more sore than what they'd had been. So there's something in there that I need to get better with, that I think will have huge carryover to the sport field. We'll do bands, against, and then we'll do bands pulling them in. So, we might set a dumbbell up behind them, hook a band to that, hook it to their waist, and then have them come up into the band into a box jump. Or, the one I've been tinkering around with a little bit is Baloo just put one on his Twitter where he had the bands set back at the rack coming through his platform and then up. So you're standing on a box and you're holding both bands in your hands. And then when you jump down, then bands are driving you into the ground. That's a variation that we do. We haven't done it that slick before. It's always been more awkward, but seeing that, I would probably change to his variation as opposed to mine, with a, kind of running through a weight and kind of trying to make it happen. His variation's way better, but we will rotate vests. I like the vest. Now, when you get a room full of kids, I've only got one vest. So you got, they're handing the vest to each other. So light days we'll use vests. Dumbbells are easy. You set the dumbbells down, the next kid grabs them. Bands are easy. Once you set the bands up, everybody can grab the bands. So we'll do it that way. The one thing I have been tinkering with a lot, and I think I see an improvement, is changing jumping surfaces. So, and it talks about this a little bit in super training. The Russians brought in sand pits because they seen so much carryover from the surface change from the gym floors they were on to the sand they were in. We'll do foam. We'll do foam from the ground, like on our box jump, or we'll set it against a weight for our broad jump just to change that surface. And then we'll go with different types of foam. And then we'll go out to the arena. It's sand. So we'll make our jumps in the sand. That way we probably change our surfaces more than we change anything.
Do you have them practice landing in awkward positions as well, or is everything that you're doing like that squared stance? Because like I know a lot of times in sports, especially, like you can't guarantee that you're going to land with both feet in the exact right place. So is that something that you incorporate with like depth drops and things like that, or when you're landing off the jumps?
I'll tell you what, I think that happens on accident. And I'll tell you why. So most of the kids you get are going to be poor absorbers. So when they do land, they can't absorb the force, and it naturally puts them in awkward positions. And then now when you put a dumbbell in their hand, you get the same thing. So you could, and I might be wrong on this, by no means am I the authority, but I think if you teach them to absorb and get them better at getting in a good position, then you work through all them awkward positions. And then once they're accommodated and they're landing well, then now you change your variation. But, I see it a lot, especially going up in the box jump. and I know not everybody's box jumpers. I like it because I can see exactly what's going on with my athletes. You watch some small awkward kids and the way they produce force, they'll produce force in almost a semi unilateral stance if you're not watching them. And then they'll land in the most awkward positions when they're not prepared to produce the force and then accept it. Do I need to teach him to land in a more awkward position than what he's already landing in, or just try to get him landing how I want him and then now find the next variation that he's weak in? That's kind of how I view that. I don't know. That is a question I've never been asked in an application that could probably be used. I just think that there's a lot of athletes, young athletes like we're talking, are poor force producers and poor force absorbers. So it sets itself up for that.
You've had some pretty awesome guests on your podcast, obviously. What are some of the biggest takeaways that you've had from some of the guests you've had, that maybe some nuggets maybe that they gave you that you're like, okay, I'm going to try to incorporate that? Or what's something that you've taken away from a coach that really impacted your training or changed what you were doing in a different way?
Man, that's a heck of a list, and I'll try not to bore you with all of them that I've kind of picked up. But let's see. I'm not a football coach, but the prep casts and stuff I do, a lot of my guys play football. I watch a lot of football, and it really hit a chord with me this year. But I had Chris Corfist on, and he started talking about the tradition of pregame. Back in the old days, people showed up at 6:30 to see that. That was part of the show. Well, now they don't. Now they show up right before kickoff. Well, coaches, catered to the people in the stands then, and pregame was this huge buildup. Well, you don't get that energy back when the national anthem plays. I watched some coaches this year that took full advantage of their 70 minutes pregame and ran it like a practice. Well, it's warm out still. It's early season. You don't get that energy back. Them are your best reps. They're gone now. Now that doesn't directly relate to me, probably like the question says, but that's something that really stuck out with me this year and kind of put a lot of things in perspective. Winning in his warm-ups, I got to talk to him and we got to go through them and seeing the change in my athletes from that stance, just adding in them weak spots and getting hypertrophy, getting the size build up. It doesn't take that much time. You're going to do some sort of a warm-up anyhow. That was a huge carryover. I write a lot of the stuff down these guys say, and then it almost feels like you're stealing it later on. But, I think the biggest nuggets I've kind of taken away is the psychology of it all. Kids, and this can happen. I don't know if you guys have kids. I have kids and they're about grown, but, there's stuff that goes on in your house that you think you have a handle on and you don't. You don't know where your kid is mentally. You don't know what's going through their head and the pressures of school, the pressures of sports, all of that stuff. You talk to them or whatever, and you think, they're good. They're good. Well, they may not be good. And I get this, once I saw the gym and the kids come into the gym and I saw them bring all their baggage in and then kind of lay it out at my feet, maybe because I'm not their parent. I'm just somebody that's trying to help. That was an eye-opening experience. Now I got into some conversations with Derek Hansen out in Utah, he's in Idaho, and we got deep into that. I thought he set the stage up really well for that. Is the weights are fine. What we're teaching them in the weight room and getting them scholarships and all that stuff, that's great. But at the end of the day, they're people and they got issues, and you got to figure out what those issues are to try to help them through it. And you work with some athletes that really get bogged down in expectation, and how do you help them maintain all of that and hold it all together long enough to do what they got to do. That's a huge takeaway that I've gotten. Some of them are a little deeper and it's more of a mindset, and they're probably too long to go into, but I just released a Vogel podcast and Brandon Bird, and those two went deep, deep, deep down rabbit holes. And man, they were just unbelievable to talk to and unbelievable to listen to. And I'll tell you what, those two, I don't want to discredit anybody else I've ever talked to, but those two and me saw things really clearly together. And so it just opened up a lot of organic conversation, and it didn't feel like you had to push stuff, and you could set each other up for debates that maybe the listener didn't know you were setting each other up, but you guys did. And I think that makes for an amazing podcast.
How'd you get into the podcast space? Like what, like you asked us, like, well, we were just bored. Like we didn't have anything better to do on a Wednesday usually than to do it. So we were just like, let's start a podcast. So what got you into reaching out to some, because you've had some awesome guests on, you had some great coaches on, had some great conversations with a lot of these coaches like you're talking about, but what led you to come into this space as well?
A fluke, really, at the end of the day. I got asked to do Prepcast for football, and the podcast idea kind of been nagging at me, but I am terrible with technology. I mean, it seemed like such a daunting task to try to figure all of this out and set up a podcast. Well, then once I got asked to do Prepcast, I was like, what would be a good idea is to bring a couple athletes in on Saturday morning. And I started with my gym kids, just that I know, just to get them talking and let the community hear them and get to know them. With the papers gone and the distance it seems between the generations now, I thought, this might be a gap builder that now when you run into these kids at the store, you feel more comfortable talking to them because you know a little bit more about them. They're not just isolated. So that's why we called it Plates and Pancakes. Now the overall title is Voodoo Power because that's the name of the gym, but the actual show title is Plates and Pancakes. Saturday morning, I would bring them in. Usually, 4 to 6 of them would show up. I'd only interview 2, but 4 to 6 would show up because they knew I was fixing breakfast. So I would fix breakfast. We'd all sit out at the table, and that seemed to loosen them up. I worked off a questionnaire I'd built for my gym athletes, and I tried to intermix those questions in there just to kind of give them a little bit to work off of. And then I always threw in a conspiracy theory question that would kind of throw them off and try to loosen them up. Well, that's where it started. So we started working through that. And then somebody said, hey, would you be interested in talking to a coach? Yes, I would. So it started with local guys. It started with the Drexel football coach, the Archie football coach, some of those guys. Well, you can see the end coming, right? You've only got so many athletes that are willing to come out and talk to you, and you're taking 2 of them at a time in a town of 1,600. The end is inevitable. So I took a chance and I emailed a few guys. Well, I emailed Tony Holler. And I'll tell you what, that dude got back with me within an hour and said, sure, let's do it. And I was nowhere near prepared to interview somebody that smart and that set up in a system, but he was generous and he didn't treat me bad. He treated me very well. And then so I started using him. He's like, I had a good time. If you need guests, let me know. I'll help you out. And he sent me some unbelievable coaches that are, Brad Fortney and some of those guys, Brad Dixon, that are doing great stuff all over the country. And they said yes. Well, then you start building up a relationship with these guys. Well, then these guys are like, who would be a good fit? This guy. Well, then he gives you this guy. So that was building up on the backside. And then on the other side, I was sending Instagram messages out, Twitter messages out to Matt Winning, Jim Windler, like guys I thought that would never come on, but you can't get a no if you don't ask. Well, then boom, Winning said yes. And then Windler said yes. And they actually showed up. You know what I mean? It's like you get them to say yes, but when you're sitting at your computer and you're 2 minutes before the start of the podcast, the only thing you can think of is, man, I hope this guy was serious. And they were, and they did it. So then I started pulling in the powerlifting side, the stuff I really liked. And then on the other side, I was talking to coaches doing amazing things with kids that were on the speed side. And it just meshed. And then it just kept growing. I don't know. Guys say yes every day that I'm like, why in the world are you saying yes? But what they do.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. I don't know. I think people in the strength and conditioning space are some of the most genuine people, though. If you talk to the right people and get the right people, they're very genuine. They want to help. They want to get the right information out there too. So I don't know. In our experience, it seems like when we talk to that is got a name in the industry or whatever, it just seems like they want to help. So they're willing to give you some of their time. But I would imagine you've had similar experiences where they're just so genuine that they're just really good guests.
they're unbelievable, and they don't ask much of you. You know, they just ask to be treated fairly and have good questions and treat them like you would anybody. And you do that, then you're helping them because you're throwing out their information. It's work they don't have to do. It's free content. A lot of those guys in the beginning, when I'm done, I'll have a Google Drive. I'll put everything on a Google Drive, and I'll be like, hey, if you want to make reels, if you want to, whatever you want to do, you have access to everything we just did. So if that helps with your content building, I'm all for it. I don't do it. I don't do it for money. Not to say I wouldn't. I just haven't had the right sponsors and the right stuff that fits. So that's not what I'm chasing. I'm more chasing the conversation and the knowledge. But so yeah, I can give a guy his stuff and not have to worry about a sponsor being upset, or, you know, they're not taking nothing from me. You know, if you put it on your channel and it says my podcast, people are going to listen too. So I found that helps a lot, especially in the beginning, because those guys that are on Instagram and have a lot of followers, they use a lot of those clips.
All right, enough of these damn kids. Let's talk about powerlifting. How did you get into powerlifting initially?
That's a good question. So probably like anybody, the first thing you do when you hit the gym is just hit a bodybuilding circuit. Right. I mean, that's what you know, that's what you grew up with. That's what muscle and fitness had. That's what all that had. So I want to say that the information I was chasing online to try to get better at that led me to West Side versus the World. And you know, Michael Fahey did an amazing job on that documentary. And I was like, holy cow, that's pretty cool. Now I'm 40 years old. That's a heck of a time to decide you want to start powerlifting. But it was closer to what I wanted to do. I wanted to lift some heavier weights in the gym. I wanted something that would sustain my drive to return to the gym. So that, and then that led to, well, where the heck do you start? You know, I looked into some Louis Simmons stuff. Well, when you first start reading that stuff, it's really confusing. You know, okay, we're doing this. He's doing, you know, he's got these three methods he's doing. He's got this strength curve he's trying to hit. How do you put all that together? Well, in the process, I found Jim Windler's 531, and that made everything so simple. So I'm like, okay, I'll run this. And then I started doing the boring but big program. My gosh, that'll wear you out. You know, but I put size on, I put strength on, I started getting mobility in my hips. I started feeling better. And that's what, and then, so I'm an Adrian, like I said, I jacked around and I found the NASA Association. That, you know, they're not super serious. They're not like USAPL or something like that, where, you know, I'm not chasing titles. I'm not chasing any of that. Well, they had a powerlifting meet down in Joplin. Joplin's a little over an hour. Nothing I couldn't make. Pretty easy. So I loaded up, went down there. The guys there were great. Everybody was, you know, laid back, willing to help. I didn't lift very well, but the experience was worth the effort. So now when I come back, now I start tweaking what I'm doing. Okay, what can I do to get this better and that better? And then we started going to because there's not very many in Missouri as far as NASA. Now there's some USAPL stuff, but I haven't branched out that far. But Iowa had a bunch. We started going to Iowa, just up to Des Moines, and those people up there were unbelievable. And they moved it from Des Moines down to Winterset, the ones we go to. And now I'll try to hit 2 of those a year just to see what I'm doing in the gym. How's it carrying over? And yeah, it's a good little getaway. Winterset's where John Wayne was born. It's where the bridges of Madison County are. So my wife had stuff to do while I was getting ready to lift, and then we'd lift and we could still make it home, you know, that night, 3 hours or whatever it is. So now they have some up in Trenton, which is, you know, but it's early spring. So you're not very far from the Iowa one. So we usually just go to the Iowa one, but I know it's not probably an awesome story, but that's how it started. And then finding Windler and then starting to listen to Windler. And it's like, just the stuff he said was so appealing. Like he's such a real person that talks like somebody you would encounter in the gym, not pretentious, not any of those things, you know, just gives you the facts. And if you don't want to hear them, don't take them. But what he put out in his books helped me tremendously.
Now, going back to the mindset thing, how much have you seen a carryover in your own personal mindset when it comes to powerlifting and having to get under the bar and come over or even overcome fear, right? Like a lot of people don't realize when you're handling heavy weights, it's not like your injury risk is nothing, right? So there's a mental aspect to it that I think is I find very beneficial. But have you noticed the same thing?
Yes, very much so. And when you do hit them bigger weights for you, whatever your PRs are, it builds a certain confidence that I don't think anything else can do. Now, the risk to reward, you got to weigh out what that is. And as I get a little older, sometimes you have to make that decision. Do I want to take it a little bit further, or do I want to shut it off here? Now there's some, there's some of that in there, but yes, as you getting under heavier weights and then you start moving weights you didn't think you could move. And then that mindset under the bar when everything slows down and you can think your way through the lift. And there's that point in there where your mind's telling you that you want to dump it. But then there's that little tiny portion of you that says, what happens if you keep driving? What happens if you just go a little bit longer, and then you pull a weight you never pulled, or you squat a weight you never squatted? Yes, that carries over into life so much. When stuff gets really crappy and you're ready to throw in the towel, what happens if I wait one more day, or whatever the case may be? Now, I think that switch is different for everybody. I would never say I have that elite mindset, but I've been around some people that do, and they can bring the room up to them when they walk in and they never sink to the room. I'm probably not that guy. I could work on that and get better at it, but those people have something I'll never have. The Matt Winnings of the world have something I'll never have. And I don't know. That's the question, right? Can you get there, or are you born with that? Yeah, I think you can improve it, but I don't know if you can overcome the way you're wired or not. I think you can get better every day, and you should get better every day, but there's just some guys that are just built different.
Yeah, there's not a lot of Dave Hoffs rolling around in the world. There's not a lot of Oliveras rolling around in the world. There's some people that I'll never catch, obviously, but I still have that mindset of like what you're talking about. I'm going to do the best that I can with what's given to me so that I can continue to get better and better and better, because when I get better, the people around me are going to get better because I'm trying to grow, I'm trying to learn, and hopefully the people around me are going to grow and learn from what I'm learning as well. So a lot to be said about that.
Yeah, and you guys run gyms, so you guys understand this. You bring in a kid that's or an athlete that's fairly weak, and you're really stronger than they are, and you're helping them and helping them and helping them, and all day, all of a sudden you turn around one day and they're burying your numbers. You got to be happy for that person. It's an ego. It's a little bit of an ego hit when you watch some of these guys just move your numbers like it's nothing. But man, that to me means more than what I move under the bar. Hopefully I move enough that drives that athlete to want to get there, but then hopefully I have the knowledge to take them past that. And then once they get past it, maybe they help me with some stuff that I'm missing. And then now I can come up, and then it works like a loop, and then we can keep building.
So what did you want to talk about? What you totaled? What was your total, or was your best total?
Oh,
what's the total you're working towards, or are you still working towards a total? Or you don't have to if you don't want to.
No. I mean, I would never tell anybody that I am great at this, but I want to say right now in NASA, the Missouri Masters record for the 198 is I want to say it's a 405 squat, and at Iowa I took a 410. And I was driving it up out of the hole, and then I don't know what happened. I was out of the hole. I was on the way up, and I just ran out of steam. So I know what adjustments I think I have to make there to get. And now I think it's went up. I've made some adjustments in the gym, and I think that's went up. I think my best bench is a 304, which isn't crazy, but a 198, 304, and not awesome. And then my best deadlift tied the NASA Missouri Masters record at 475, which that day I should have pulled 5. I don't know why I didn't. I had one more pull, assuming you're going to break a record, they give you one more pull, right? And I'd done the math wrong in my head with the kilograms to pounds and all that stuff, and I thought I'd beat it, and I was comfortable leaving there with the record. Well, that being said, I tied it. So I am just shy, and hopefully in April I can do it. God willing. Take the Missouri squat, take the deadlift, and then my bench is good enough. It won't take it, but it would be right there. that I could walk out with the total too. And, God willing, maybe I pull 3 records, in April.
Is that the one? Is it going to be in Des Moines?
It'll be in Winterset, so just south of Des Moines.
Okay, cool.
And I got a bunch of kids that are wanting to, from the gym that are wanting to go up and lift. And I think that helps tremendously. Having people, lifting with you, not that the people there aren't great, but there's something about a meet that drives up the intensity and make you hit some of those numbers that you wouldn't hit in your own gym. Maybe. Yeah. I'm not
get a hold. Oops, go ahead.
Oh, I'm not hitting them totals of them other guys you're talking about, Oliveira and Harvey.
None of us are. None of us are.
Hey, no, I'm not giving up until I die. Okay.
Alex he's chasing it, which is great. So hey, more power to you, my man.
I'll tell you what, at 43, I know I've only got so much time.
Yeah.
And then you got to figure out where your new PRs are coming from.
Hey, Donnie Thompson hit 3,000 at 46. So
there again, you're talking about 1 in a million.
Fair, but that doesn't mean your best days aren't still ahead of you.
You still got plenty of time. Plenty of time.
So it goes back to Dumb and Dumber. So you're saying there's a chance.
Absolutely.
Exactly. But John Denver was full of shit. I thought the Rocky Mountains would be a lot rockier. So, but we need to get a hold of powerlifting or openpowerlifting.org because they got you mixed up with another person, and there's 2 results in here. So it's making you look really good if you go to openpowerlifting.org. There's
the guy that looks really good. That's me. That's me.
Is it? Okay.
No, it's not. So hopefully you guys didn't think you were getting an exceptional power lifter on here and then find out you're just getting a mediocre dude.
Well, I was trying to figure it out as I'm looking at it on here because there's the M1 class, which I knew was the master's class. And then there was one like a couple years before and it says that person was 27. And I'm like, wait a second. I'm not the best at math here, but I don't think in 3 years you can go from 27 to a master's class.
It'd be pretty tough to do. Yes.
Yeah, for sure. So you said you're going to have the kids come and compete with you. Is that the first time you'll have kids that you train competing in a powerlifting meet?
No, it's not. This will be the first with this group. My daughter has what is she? She might have the teenage Missouri records. NASA doesn't do a great job keeping up with them. I know at the time she had all 4. She had the bench, the deadlift, the squat, and the total. And then I brought another kid up, and he was light, and his parents registered him in 3 classes, and he went in and took all 4 records in 3 classes. So he walked out with 12 state records.
It's incredible.
So yeah. So I've had some kids go and do really well.
Is there a better feeling than when you get young girls that powerlift and they understand how much they can actually do?
It's amazing. And it's amazing when they like it. Because now you can, well, especially like when it's my daughter, there's something now we can do together that divide seems to, kind of be there on what can you do and what can't you do. Yeah, she likes to come home. She likes to hang out and stuff like that. But what do you do after that? Where this creates a situation where we can go and do some of these things. And I'll tell you what I found out there too was I walked in and you got your mind on your stuff, right? You got to lift too. And so I probably didn't do a great job of coaching my own kid when I was there because I was focused on my stuff too. I expected her to know a little bit more, but it was her first meet. She didn't know what to expect. She had butterflies, but some of the ladies at that NASA meet really took to her. They seen our rub and they come and got her and they took her with them. They got her meet ready. And that's a lot to say about the character of people you run into in powerlifting. Most people, they could care less. If you're at another sporting event, they don't care. But powerlifting, those ladies saw what she was going through and they're like, hey, can we come help? And then she went and prepped with them and I was able to prep with some other kids I had there and man, it worked out great. And she had some unbelievable lifts that day.
Yeah, I think that's one of the coolest things at the meet is how much people are willing to help one another, at least if it's a good run meet. I've been to meets where people are very cliquey and they don't necessarily want to help other people, but I just started coaching 3 college girls and these girls are a freshman and 2 sophomores and they're going to be stronger than most dudes by the end of their school.
that's where she had got her bench press was better than a lot of the, smaller boys, 8th grade freshmen, probably even some sophomores. Now you start getting into juniors and seniors. I mean, even a weak kid would outbench her, but for where she was doing really well, and it carried over to softball really well. She had one of her better seasons that year. Um, I don't even know, man. She hit unbelievable, and the power it built, and then, from the deadlift and the squat and all that stuff, it really seemed to carry over well for her.
How do you have you ever thought about like sponsoring powerlifting at the high school and like maybe formulating a club or anything like that? Or has anybody ever reached out to you to do that? I know in Missouri it seems like powerlifting as a sport in the high school setting is very just voluntarily, like you have to volunteer to do it, and it's not real well ran and things like that. But have you ever thought about maybe team at Adrian and then going to some of these meets that they have for the high schoolers?
The thoughts crossed my mind. I've talked to a few people about it. There wasn't a whole lot of interest, so that's kind of why we hit the avenue we hit. You know, I think there's a lot of merit to it, and I think Missouri might be missing the boat a little bit compared to like Texas and North Carolina and some of these states that take it a lot more serious. But I think it comes down to available people. I think the athletes are there. I think the coaches and the time and all that stuff aren't there. Maybe one day it will be, but different conversations I'd had with people, I think it would be great. I think in the older days, maybe they may have did some stuff like that and got your conference together and had a powerlifting meet with your conference, something like that. It gives kids drive to be in the weight room. It also gets kids out and see how much stronger somebody else is than them. That's humble. That's very humbling when you're a stud in your own weight room, but you're not seeing what these other dudes are doing in their weight room. And then you get there and you're like, holy cow, dude, that kid just threw up 550. We ain't got a kid in our weight room that can hit 5, stuff like that. And I think it creates drive. I think there's a lot of merit to it, whether your gym becomes all powerlifting focused or not, just getting stronger becomes the focus. But I think that's why there's a lack of NASA meets at the high school level, because, or even USAPL, that the kids aren't there. They cut them breaks. They cut them exceptionally good rates to try to get them there. But unless you're around that Joplin area, maybe a little bit of Springfield, you don't see a lot of these other schools gravitating to it. Maybe up on the Iowa line like Trenton, but Trenton had they had a wrestling coach that was a powerlifter, and his son was a powerlifter, and his son won state his senior year as a wrestler. So he had a drive to start that, and he was in the school system, so that worked. I think maybe Lexington has a little powerlifting team. So there's pockets, but there's nothing organized. And being I'm not in the school system, I think it's very difficult to get something going.
I know when I was in Neosho, the short time I just spent a year there, but they had a powerlifting team and it was just purely voluntary, and they didn't even, the meet wasn't sanctioned or anything that they went to. It was just kind of a collection of whoever wanted to show up. There weren't really very good standards for judging on depth and things like that. It was just kind of like a fun thing. So like kind of what you're saying is like where Texas and some of these other states, are doing a really good job of putting powerlifting teams together and organizations together and competing at the high school level. Like we're really falling behind here in Missouri, I feel like. But then you have places like McKendree University that has one of the best powerlifting teams in the nation. And it's like, well, how can that be? How can we have something like that, but then our state is just so far behind, I feel like, when it comes to training powerlifting. So I don't know if you've seen the same trends.
Yeah, and it seems like the places that do have them, they're turning out freaks. You hear that a lot. We're training athletes, not powerlifters. Yeah, I get that. But at the end of the day, a lot of these methods were stolen from the Russians and Louis Simmons that created both. It created athletic, strong dudes, and then you can lean your focus a little bit more at meet prep or whatever towards the powerlifting, but you don't have to give up on what you're doing. Strength is strength, and if you got strong dudes, let them compete. If you got strong girls, let them compete.
I got an idea for you. So today I just applied to be the state chair of the EPO in Colorado. They coincidentally have a vacancy in Missouri, so I think there might be a future for you there.
Well, we'll see what we can do. If you think it's something I can help you out with, we'll talk about it and see what we can set up.
Well, have you seen what the APO is? So Dave Hoff, Anthony, and there's a bunch of other people. They're on the board, and they took the WPO, and this is the American version of it. And they just started this in December, so it's like just starting out on the ground. And I noticed that the regular membership is only $50, and student memberships are only $30. So I went and I was like,
Really? See, and that's great. You're not trying to rob anybody. You're just trying to get people to show up and help benefit the sport. And I have seen some stuff on the APO, not looked into it really, really, really deep, but I did see where Dave Hoff was kind of promoting it on some of his stuff. I think he had an Instagram post the other day that was kind of getting into APO. So, I think there's lifters here. It's just finding a good location to get them all. Like Kansas City, that should be a great location. You got
Easy.
Kansas City,
Super easy.
but it seems like it doesn't really exist that much. You got Kansas City, Missouri, and you got Kansas City, Kansas. So you've, and then all of the towns surrounding it should be better maybe than what it is. I think the lifters are there. It's just finding the spot to get them all together.
All right, I'm going to apply that.
don't you guys have Kansas City and St. Louis?
Yeah.
Well, St. Louis is, I don't know. It's from Kansas City, what, 3 hours or so, but that's not a terrible drive. If it's not like you're driving 8 hours, or it's not like you got to go out to Florida or the East Coast or something like that. 3 hours really isn't anything if competing is what you want to do.
Shoot, just put it in Columbia. Let's just put it right smack dab in the middle of the state and just have everyone come from all corners and call it good. So no one's out anything really. But I mean, I'll put your application in for that position. So I'll apply for you so you can run things because you seem like you have a good grasp. So if you get a call from the APO later and you're wondering why, I'm just going to go ahead and do that for you.
Well, I don't know how awesome I would be at it, but it's definitely something to think about. I've never really thought about it that much, but Columbia is not maybe a bad place to set it up. I mean, I think if you're going to do it over a weekend, set it up somewhere fun so that if people wanted to stay, they got some stuff to do. All those cities have stuff to do. I mean, Springfield's another good one. At the end of the day, you got Springfield and Branson and St. Louis and Columbia and Kansas City. The cities are great cities to host something like that.
Sounds like the APO needs to move into Missouri then. The reason I applied for it is because here in Colorado, we have USAPL and WRPF, basically a little bit of USPA, but every meet I've gone to, I've felt like they could be better. And the powerlifting is not a big thing here. And yet we have athletes all over the place that could be utilizing this. Like the kids coaching the new team are absolutely insane. Like I had a kid walk in off the street last week in total 1,500 on the team. And he's getting ready for nationals. He just wanted practice basically. And he walks in and gets 1,500 total. Like, this is insane. Why don't we have powerlifting be a bigger thing here?
I've got some kids here, I don't know what their totals would have been, but had they had a place to go in off times, you know what I mean? The close places want to do one in October. Well, how are you going to get kids in October? Their coach ain't going to let them go to that. That's prime time of football season, so you got to set them up where the meets are productive for what the people you want are available to do. October might be great for an adult, but it's not going to be good for, a girl that's playing volleyball or a boy that's playing football. Now spring after wrestling, that way you could capitalize on football players and wrestlers, because those are your two real meathead athletic sports, right there at the end of summer before football really starts, before they go back to school, when those kids have worked out all summer and they're peaked, now that might be a time to do something like that. I'm not sure.
You're not saying baseball players are meatheads? What are you talking about? Baseball players? No, I'm just kidding. I'm totally kidding.
I was going to say, you can say that, but I don't know how many people you're going to get that be like, yeah, he's right. But
no shot. They're just a bunch of weenies. I was a baseball player, and I know the kind of atmosphere that revolves around that. So
I'll tell you what, if you can get them in the gym, they turn into freaks. I had a nephew. He was one of the first kids that came, and he wanted to play college baseball. He played a lot of comp baseball, and he was a good ball player, and he knew his fastball needed to come up. And I'm not the guy to teach him how to throw harder. That's not my job. But my job was to get him on the weights that would facilitate that. And we got his fastball up where he started getting some looks, and then he went over and played at Ottawa for a while, and he got to achieve his dream because he went into the weight room. Sometimes that's just what's needed at the end of the day, is to find some weights.
That was fun. I was talking to a kid. I think I posted about him on my story the other day, and he was as a sophomore last year, 85. Just could stay around 85, work low 80s, and wasn't real dedicated to the weight room yet. This year, came back in August, really has been dedicated. Squats went way up, bench presses went way up, and he was throwing a mound the other night. Like, he's finally starting to kind of ramp up for season started, and he's like, Coach, I'm throwing like 75%, the ball's coming out at 85. And I'm like, yeah, that's awesome. Like, you've done the work, you've used the weight room to facilitate the dreams that you want, right? Like, you go to your pitching coach, you do your thing. That's great. But I'm just going to give you the means to be able to produce that force that you need. And he's like, dude, I think 90 is going to happen. And I'm like, yeah, I think it's going to happen quicker than you think it is too, which is going to be really cool to see, because that opens up so many doors when you can hit that 90-mile-an-hour mark. So it's really cool to see that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's just, it doesn't get taught to those guys. They're out there running pulls. Well, maybe you could lay off the pulls.
Don't get me started.
Come in and lift some weights, and let's see what benefits the player better. I mean, I've never known a baseball player that needed to run a mile in a continuous circle to help the game. That seems to be what we always fall back on.
Yep, absolutely.
That damn presidential testing that we had once upon a time, it fucking got the mile ingrained in us. Like, what's your mile time? Who gives a shit?
Who cares?
And that's what's funny. I'm sure you guys are familiar with super training, and I talked about this with the guests the other day, but now that you bring it up, coming out of Russia, when all this stuff got kind of thrown out, is Western Europe picked the conjugate weightlifting side of it. America went to the cardio side of it. And then they did their best to run a hit campaign on weights. I mean, it was like almost like say no to drugs. It was, if you lifted weights, you were a freak. You were a moron. Nobody lifts weights. You just need to go be able to run forever. And it's taken, when did that stuff kind of come out? That probably come out in the early 50s. So it's taken, almost 80 years to overcome that stigma that running a mile is going to make you a better athlete.
Yeah, Mel Sip talks about it in that book. He's like, the Cold War fucked us because we wouldn't learn any of the Soviet stuff because they were the bad people. So their training obviously was worse. And I was explaining it to someone today. I go, if you look at Olympians, they all are freaks. They're all on drugs. The only thing that changes is the training methods. Like, we created Diana ball to try to beat all the other teams, and we did at first. And then once they got the D ball, it was game over again. Like, we still sucked.
All right. So let me throw this out at you. I think they should run the Olympics untested.
Have you seen the one that Peter Thiel is making? It's untested Olympic Games.
Absolutely.
No, I haven't. No, but the reason why I say that is they can't control it. They can't control it now. So all you're doing is limiting your athletes that are trying to abide by the rules. But you've shown you can't stop Russia. I'm sure China is state sponsored in something. Just do away with it and let them go and see what happens. And then in the record book, you can write down, well, he broke these records at this point when the Olympics became untested.
Yeah, just put a date on it and let them hash it out. How exciting would the 100-meter be if we could let those guys actually be as fast?
We're going to find out through the enhanced games. That's what I think they're calling it even. But the funny thing is have you ever seen the documentary Icarus, where the guy goes and he explains it, like, even if I took all the drugs in the world, I'm not Lance Armstrong. Doesn't matter. Like, those people are still freaks.
At the end of the day, you can never say it's fair, because you can't stop those people. And I think the Olympic Committee, and I might get a little bit of hate for this, but I think they're corrupt. I think they cower to the people that they cower to, and they're never going to change the rules, and they're always going to let some people benefit and other people suffer. So take them out of the equation, and just whatever you as an athlete need to do to compete, let's do it.
Yeah, I'm all for it. Bring it into baseball too. Bring juice back. Let's go.
They did, Nathan. Haven't you noticed?
That's true. They did stop testing as rigorously as they were. So I mean, no, they actually
Well,
just juiced the balls. So
they found out there's money in it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I think the NFL's the same way. You can tell people what you want to tell. College football's the same way. Those kids know when they're getting tested. Hey, we need you clean by this date. So we'll hit you with Anavar, clear up until we can't hit you any closer if that's what you want to do. And then you come off and then you go clean. And then they wouldn't tell you the day, right? If they weren't trying to accommodate enhanced athletes.
Yeah, the funny thing is that's with powerlifting, right? Is it's drug tested powerlifting. It doesn't mean it's drug free powerlifting. It's can you pass the test?
Yeah. And the crazy thing is everybody thinks, well, they're cheating. Everybody's going to have an opinion on it. They are, but more people than what they would give credit to are out there doing something. It's not as an even playing field as what you would think. We've all worked out in the workforce and they have a drug test, but how many guys do you know that are on drugs?
Well, that's like the Sheffield is today in the UK. So it's the IPF one. And Jesus is allegedly clean, but totals more than Dan Bell. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, the numbers don't lie, right? I mean, there's certain metrics that we've never been able to beat natural. So when those numbers start getting there, then you have to figure it out. What are they doing? Why couldn't they catch Bonds and McGuire and all those guys? What were they doing? And then the documentary comes out and they find out what they were doing. There's always ways around the system, whether it's like Icarus and they're passing bottles through the wall, there's ways to go about it. And you're always going to have guys that bend the rules.
I think
that's the best part of the movie, right? Is at the end, they ask the guy who created the test. They're like, are they ever going to catch him? He's like, no, like, it's never going to happen. It's an arms race.
No. And you listen to Jordan Burroughs on, the Joe Rogan show talking about it, and he's upset. He should be, he's clean. He has to watch everything he eats, everything he takes, everything that goes into his body. He has to watch. Yet he's wrestling the best wrestlers in the world they're drugged. I'd hate to see what Burroughs would be like if he was running trend. You couldn't stop that dude.
I don't want to run into that dude if he's on trend. No thanks. I'm good.
I don't want to run into that dude.
Ever. Period. Yeah, I'm good.
That's like Spencer Lee. I wouldn't want to run into that guy, and he was 140 pounds. Like, what? No thanks.
Now you're opening up a really good conversation, and I know you guys are kind of on a time limit, but you can't outrun genetics, right? I mean, Spencer Lee's mom was an Olympian judo, and his dad was the coach, so he was obviously a very good athlete, a very good practitioner of judo. The McCaffreys, the McCaffreys' mom's side of the family were Olympians. And then obviously their dad was one of the best receivers to ever play. There's some things you can't outrun. When you start looking at the major leagues and you start looking at NFL, there's a lot of father sons. There's a lot of uncle nephews. There's a lot of, now we're making freaks and we're helping them get there. We're helping them get to their goals. But at the end of the day, those top guys are born through it being handed down.
I mean, look at the Sanderson family right now. Colorado's got the benefit of seeing those two come through right now. So, I mean, yeah, you can't outkick your coverage sometimes, unfortunately. I tell people I'm very fortunate to get out of what I got out of my body. So I'm pretty happy with what I got.
Well, that's where the argument is, well, it's got to be fair. I'm like, well, nothing's fucking fair. It's not fair from birth. There's no such thing. Like, you either let everybody juice up to the same level so that it can be somewhat fair, or just let them all do it. Let's see what happens.
There's a lot of truth to that. I was talking to Brandon Bird a while back, and him and Donnie Thompson are friends, and the Eagles started doing body tempering because they could practice harder and they could recover faster. At the end of the day, you could say, well, that's not fair that they were doing that, and this other team didn't even know about it and they weren't doing that. I mean, what is fair at the, who establishes what fair is? The loser or the winner?
Hopefully the winner. I think it takes more liability out of their hands too, because then they don't have to, there's not testing, there's not mandatory this, mandatory that. You have to do this, you have to do that. It's all under one umbrella now. It's like, okay, we're all here. So let it fly.
Right.
Just let it fly.
Right.
Let's go.
And with what you said there, I think very rarely does the winner determine what's fair.
That's true. Unfortunately.
Although history is written by the winners, so that's a plus. But it's also ironic that in powerlifting, where it's a sport that is openly allowing drugs, the drug tested divisions are far, far more popular than the drug free or the drug untested ones. So it's like the stigma is still so great that people that even have the option to do so are choosing not to because of how it's perceived.
Well, I mean, we wouldn't. Why is natural bodybuilding never taken off like Olympia?
Because it doesn't look as cool.
Right. You can't get a Jay Cutler naturally. You can't create a Ronnie Coleman naturally.
You can't even get Arnold or Frank Zane naturally. And people are like, what do you mean? I go, no, the drugs were just legal back then. You could just go to the cooler at Gold's and get it. So it didn't matter. In 1990, when they made it illegal, is when they fucked us all.
And it would be interesting to see how close you could get a natural guy to Arnold, because I don't imagine that the steroids that Arnold were using was what Ronnie Coleman had. How effective were those? Obviously, they were effective. I'm not saying they weren't, but how effective were they as compared to what we can buy on the shelf now and what supplements we can get our hands on?
So I go down this rabbit hole quite often. It's ironic that you bring up Ronnie because that is one of the most genetic outliers in the world. Like, so people don't believe how much gear that the Olympians take. And it's like, no, they are that 0.01% for bodybuilding. But yeah, if you look at the tested bodybuilders, they can get really lean and they can look pretty good, but they'll never acquire that size that the guys have now from the GH and the insulin and all those other things. Like Arnold was running testosterone, DECA, and D-ball. Like that was the golden era cycle, right? But now that they have insulin and the growth hormone and all these other things, it's like, oh, these guys are like different human beings. They're not even on the same playing field anymore.
Excuse me. You go back and you look at the wrestlers now, like in some of the documentaries, like Rick Rude and some of those guys, and you don't even recognize them. I mean, they're just frail from what they once were once they come off that stuff. So I see why people do it. It's not something, I do or I would ever push on anybody. That's a decision that people have to make, but you can see why people do get caught up in it. And especially when you start throwing money in on top of it. You mean I can stay in the NFL another year and make how many $1 million? So, I think people put on rose-colored glasses when they think these athletes aren't doing something extra. You're putting millions and millions of dollars in their hands. You don't think that they're not finding out the way to stay there?
I think that goes back to the mindset thing too, right? Like if you don't understand what being competitive is and willing to do something at all costs, then you don't understand what that person's even thinking to even do that. Like as much as I love Peyton Manning, he didn't come back from that injury where he had to relearn how to use his whole right side of his body all naturally. Just didn't work that way. I'm sorry. It's not the way it goes.
Tiger Woods, after he come back from his injury, he was twice the size. But HGH wasn't illegal. So he was just,
He's always
just hammering it.
Yeah, I think he's always been pumping it ever since after like 2001, 2002, because he's yacked. Like he's still
he
yacked.
was repping 315 on bench.
Yeah,
in his prime.
He's huge.
Well, take Roger Clemens. How are you throwing faster at 50 than you were at 20?
Good old Victor Conte. Thank you, Victor.
Freaking Andy Pettit and just goes and throws him under the bus too. It's like, oh my gosh, Andy. Oh man, I'm a big Yankees fan, so I loved all that saga stuff. I'm just like, oh my god, that was such a mess.
It was, and then when the government gets involved, then it even gets to be more of a mess. And you're on Capitol Hill telling everybody that you're not on steroids, and it just turned into a whole deal. Where at the end of the day, that's a private business. Why are you on Capitol Hill?
I feel like at the end of the day,
waste of our tax money.
They should have all just went in together and been like, yeah, we did it. We did it. They should have been trying to hide it and cover it up and things like that. They should have just been like, yeah, we all did it. I think the league actually would have looked better upon them than lying. And then they get blackballed out. And it's like now, because like guys that have come out and admitted it, like A-Rod's in the good graces again, right? Like he had a terrible falling out with them, but then he was like, okay, I admitted it. It came out. Now he works for ESPN all the time. And it's like, he's getting these big games and it's like, everyone's looked the blind eye to it. So it's like, maybe they should have just all been like, yeah, we were. accepted whatever they wanted to give him and then moved on. But I don't know.
The fact
And
that
Pete
Barry
Rose
Bonds
is,
will never be in the Hall of Fame is the biggest
It's
crock
a
of shit
tragedy.
ever.
Yeah.
well, Pete Rose is in the same boat.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's
Yeah, now that shit's legal.
yeah, it's
Unbelievable. Yeah.
you know, at the end of the day, maybe you don't like what he did as a coach. You know what I mean? But as a player, he got robbed of all of it. I think you could
1,000%.
distinguish. I think you could distinguish Pete Coach, the manager, to Pete Rose, the player, and they'd be like, okay, we don't condone what happened when you were managing the Reds, but while you were a player, you deserve to be in the Hall of Fame.
1,000%.
This is why, Nathan, baseball is trash.
Hey, the people that have ran baseball and will continue to run baseball for the next 50 years suck. Completely suck. They're terrible. It's always been a terribly led organization. That's why they don't revenue that much money. That's why they don't profit that much. That's why they're almost at the bottom of the big sports. Like, I totally get it. Although I feel like last year was a good step in the right direction with the pitch clock and all that stuff. If they want to attract the younger, can't pay attention generation, blah, blah, blah. But
We also have owners like the Rockies have, and they know that they have the best bar in town, so they don't even try to make the team good.
yeah, absolutely.
Well, it's kind of like the Royals. There's nobody close, right?
Right.
So just march out whoever you want to march out. If you want to watch baseball, you're gonna have to go there. That you have a captive audience. You don't have anywhere within, 3.5, 4 hours.
Yep. Hey, good for them though. They signed Bobby Witt, so hey, good for them. Are you a big Royals fan? Do you like watching a lot of baseball or no?
I prefer, because my daughter played it, I prefer softball. So if we're gonna watch a bat and ball sport, it's gonna be college softball.
That's fair. My wife played college softball too, so every year College World Series comes on, it's on our TV all day, every day. So I totally get it.
It's a faster game. I don't think TV does it justice.
Play it. If you don't think it does it justice, play it. I played men's fast pitch for 3 years after college baseball, and it's the most terrifyingly thing. It's terrifying. Like, you got grown men throwing the ball 80 miles an hour from 46 feet at you. It's not fun, and they can make it dance all over the place. So I completely agree with you. It does not get enough credit and it does not get enough respect. It is hard.
There is nothing more scary as a parent than my daughter. I want to say she started playing gold ball when she was 14. So you roll up. So she's playing 16 gold, and you roll up to that ballpark and you see them girls, and you see that ball coming off the bat, and you see how fast the game is, and you see how compact it is, and then you're getting ready to trot your junior high girl, daughter out there with these just athletic freaks. Yeah, that I can remember the first time we showed up to a ballpark, and the gold girls were there, and you got the best, and I think Kansas City it ranks high up there with softball.
Fantastic.
I think California, Arizona is a pocket, and I think Texas is a pocket, but I think Kansas City area,
Yep.
you had Paige Parker, and you had Alex Hugo, and you had some of those girls just go and demolish records.
I only remember Jenny Finch. That's all I remember.
Yes, and she's been a good spokesman for the sport. She shows up where she needs to show up. She's never in trouble. She's just kind of like softball's sweetheart.
Can't wait to see what her son becomes, because she married that big, tall, 6'6" AAA pitcher, and they named their son Ace, which I thought was hilarious. I was like, this is awesome. So
He'll be a kicker.
yeah, probably, or just play soccer or something else. Yeah, absolutely. It's usually how it goes. Well, Alex, do you have any more questions, or do you have anything you want to follow up with before we bounce out of here?
Not off the top of my head at the moment.
Awesome. Well, Steven, thank you again for coming on a Saturday, especially giving us some of your time. We know how hard that can be sometimes, but where can people find you? How can they get a hold of you? Shout out anything you want to shout out, promote anything you want to promote. Let the people know how they can get a hold of you.
I mean, I don't have a whole lot of stuff out there other than my podcast. It's Voodoo Power, and it's on all major platforms. You can go back through the catalog. There's some really good guests. You might find something you like on there. On Instagram, I post some videos of my guys, Voodoo 4 Power, Instagram, and I believe Twitter's the same handle, Voodoo 4 Power. Twitter, I mainly use for the podcast, thumbnails and stuff like that. I'm not real active on there. Instagram, I'm usually on there trying to post something. If somebody wants to get a hold of me, they can get a hold of me on both of those platforms, or they can email me at voodoo4ranch@gmail.com.
Well, next time I'm up in the Kansas City area, I'll have to drop by and say hello. I got family that lives up in Kansas City, so I'll have to come by Adrian and just pop in and say hello, or maybe we can catch lunch sometime and bounce some ideas off of each other. If you're ever in Joplin, let me know. I'll try to make a trip over there because it's only about an hour for me too. So I'd love to meet up sometime and hang out, or try to bounce ideas, or just talk coaching and talk shop. I think that'd be great.
Man, that sounds like a plan to me. Anytime.
Awesome. Steven, thank you again. We really appreciate it. We'll link all his socials in the description below. If you're curious and you want to check those out, go ahead and do so. But thank you again, my man.
Yeah, thank you very much. And good luck with your meet coming up this week.
Absolutely.
Thank you, guys.